Cosmic nightmare researchers study human children because they create the fears. Part 1. Doctor and had studied nightmares for 300 years. Across 1,700 worlds, she had cataloged every type of fear that thinking beings could produce. She had seen warriors dream of defeat, scholars dream of ignorance, and entire civilizations dream of extinction. She thought she had seen everything fear could be. Then the consortium sent her to Earth. The blue planet hung in the viewing screen of her research vessel, turning slowly in the darkness of space. It looked peaceful. The humans living there had only just discovered faster-than-light travel. They were newcomers to the galactic community, unremarkable in most ways. Their technology was primitive. Their culture was fragmented. Their biology was standard carbon-based evolution. But their dreams were about to change everything. "Initial scans are complete," said N, her junior researcher. His crystalline body shimmered with excitement. "The humans sleep for approximately 8 hours every cycle. During that time, their neural activity increases dramatically. They dream, Doctor, vivid, complex dreams." And nodded. Most species dreamed. It was how the brain processed experience and emotion. And their nightmares. Present in all age groups. We detected fear response patterns in approximately 30% of observed sleep cycles. N manipulated the holographic display. Standard classifications: fear of death, fear of social rejection, fear of physical harm. Nothing unusual. "Then why did the consortium send us here?" And leaned forward, her 3 eyes narrowing. "They don't waste resources on standard nightmare surveys." There was one anomaly. N brought up a new set of data. Human juveniles, the ones they call children. Their nightmare emissions registered at levels we've never recorded before. The equipment flagged them as measurement errors. And felt something she rarely experienced anymore: curiosity. "Show me." The hologram shifted to display a small human dwelling. Inside, a tiny human child slept in an elevated platform they called a bed. The child couldn't have been more than 7 solar years old. As they watched, the child's neural patterns spiked. The nightmare began. The readings exploded across every scale: fear density, emotional intensity, conceptual complexity. All of them pushed past the normal ranges into territory that shouldn't exist, and stood up, her secondary hearts accelerating. "That can't be right. Check the equipment." "I've checked it 17 times, Doctor. The readings are accurate." N's voice carried a tremor. "This child is generating a Category Omega nightmare." Category Omega was theoretical. It existed only in academic papers and philosophical debates. It represented fear so pure, so fundamental, that it could influence reality itself. No confirmed Category Omega nightmare had ever been recorded in 12,000 years of consortium research. "What is the child afraid of?" and asked quietly. N adjusted the sensors, translating the nightmare's conceptual structure into something they could understand. The hologram shifted, trying to render what the child was experiencing. It showed darkness, but not simple darkness, not mere absence of light. This was darkness that watched, darkness that waited, darkness that knew the child's name and wanted something from them. The visualization couldn't capture it fully. The nightmare existed in dimensions their equipment could barely measure. "Incredible," N whispered. "The child isn't afraid of a specific threat. They're afraid of the concept of threat itself, fear of the unknown rendered into its possible form." The child stirred in their sleep and the nightmare shifted with them. New elements emerged, sounds that shouldn't exist, shapes that hurt to perceive, a presence under the bed that was both there and not there, real and imaginary, specific and infinite. Then the child woke up. The nightmare collapsed instantly, but the residual energy readings lingered in the air like radiation. "Did you record everything?" and demanded. "Every second. Doctor, what does this mean?" And stared at the sleeping child, who had already settled back into peaceful rest. It means human children can do something no other species in the galaxy can do. They can create nightmares that shouldn't be possible. Over the next week, the research team expanded their observations. They deployed subtle monitoring equipment across the human city below, focusing on children between the ages of 4 and 10. Every night brought new discoveries that challenged everything the consortium thought they knew about fear. A 9-year-old boy named Thomas dreamed of abandonment, but his nightmare didn't simply show him alone. It showed him the concept of aloneness, the philosophical certainty that connection was an illusion, and that every being existed in isolated consciousness forever. The nightmare built structures of logic that proved, irrefutably within its own context, that love was impossible and had never existed. An 8-year-old girl named Maya dreamed of her reflection. The nightmare she generated questioned the nature of identity so profoundly that 2 researchers required psychological treatment afterward. The reflection in her dream wasn't wrong because it looked different. It was wrong because it was her, and she was it, and neither of them could determine which was the original and which was the reflection, and maybe there had never been an original at all. A 6-year-old named Sophie dreamed of the dark space under the stairs in her house. The nightmare she created was so spatially impossible that it took the research team 3 days to map its geometry. The space under the stairs was somehow larger inside than outside, but also smaller, and also not a space at all but a concept of space. And inside it lived something that had always been there and would always be there, and was specifically waiting for Sophie. "They're all like this," N reported during their daily meeting. "Every human child we've monitored generates nightmares that exceed our classification system. It's not just the intensity, it's the purity. These children create fears that adult humans can't create, that adult anything can't create." Another researcher, X, added his observations. "I've analyzed the developmental data. Human children pass through a unique cognitive stage. They possess fully operational imaginations before their logical processing systems mature. They can conceive of the impossible without the automatic rejection response that adult minds employ. They believe," and said softly. "That's the key, isn't it? They believe in their nightmares completely. No part of their mind says this isn't real or this can't happen. They accept the nightmare as absolute truth in the moment they experience it." Exactly, and that belief gives the nightmare a coherence, a reality that adult fears lack. Adult nightmares are diluted by doubt and rationalization. Child nightmares are pure. And looked at the data streaming across her displays. Hundreds of nightmares, each one a masterpiece of terror, each one generated by a small human child who would wake up, eat breakfast, and play with toys, completely unaware they had created something that could reshape the consortium's understanding of consciousness itself. "We need deeper scans," she decided. "We need to understand how they do this. The mechanism, the neural pathways, the developmental factors. This could revolutionize nightmare research across the entire galaxy." "Is it safe?" N asked. "These readings are unprecedented. We don't know what we're dealing with." "That's exactly why we must study them. Knowledge is never dangerous. Only ignorance is." And began configuring the deep scan equipment. "We'll start with the child Maya. Her reflection nightmare showed the most complex conceptual structure. If we can map how her developing brain generates that level of fear, we'll understand the mechanism." They waited until Maya fell asleep that night. The deep scan equipment hummed to life, its sensors penetrating far deeper into the child's dream state than standard observation allowed. They would see not just what she feared, but how the fear was constructed, layer by layer, thought by thought. Maya began to dream. The nightmare took shape around her. The reflection appeared in the darkness of her sleeping mind. The research equipment registered the nightmare's formation. Data flooded their screens, and watched in fascination as the pure architecture of fear revealed itself. Then something changed. The nightmare paused. The reflection in Maya's dream turned slowly, impossibly, away from Maya, and looked directly at Dr. N. Across light years of space, through technology and consciousness and the barrier between dreaming and waking, something in a human child's nightmare looked at the alien researcher watching it. And it smiled. Every alarm in the research vessel screamed at once. Part 2. The research vessel's lights flickered and died. Emergency systems struggled to activate as something that shouldn't exist rippled through the ship's sensors. Dr. N stumbled backward from her console, her 3 eyes wide with shock. "Shut it down," she shouted. "Terminate the deep scan immediately." N's crystalline hands flew across the controls, but the equipment didn't respond. The connection to Maya's nightmare remained open, and through that connection, something was flowing backward. The nightmare was no longer contained in the child's sleeping mind. It was reaching out. "It won't disconnect," N said, his voice rising in panic. "The system is locked. Doctor, it's pulling data from our computers. It's learning about us." On the main display, Maya's reflection nightmare had transformed. It no longer showed just a little girl and her mirror image. Now it showed the research team. It showed their vessel. It showed their fears. X finally managed to physically sever the power connection. The equipment died with a sharp crack of electricity. The lights came back on. The ship stabilized. For a long moment, nobody spoke. "What was that?" N whispered. And secondary hearts were still racing. In 300 years of studying nightmares, she had never experienced anything like that. Nightmares didn't look back. They couldn't. They were psychological phenomena, electrical patterns in organic brains. They had no agency, no awareness, no ability to reach beyond the dreaming mind that created them. Except this one had. "Run a full diagnostic," she ordered, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Check every system. I want to know exactly what happened." The diagnostics took hours. What they revealed chilled and more than the initial incident. The nightmare hadn't just accessed their computers. It had information, psychological profiles, personal fears, memory fragments. Everything the research team had recorded about themselves was now somewhere in the structure of a human child's nightmare. "How is this possible?" X asked. "Nightmares are localized phenomena. They can't interact with external systems." "These can," N said quietly. "Or at least they're learning to. We've been observing them for weeks, scanning them, recording them. Every time we measured a nightmare, we connected to it, and apparently it connected back." N pulled up the historical data. "Doctor, look at this. I've been comparing our observations from the first week to our observations from yesterday. The nightmares have changed. They're more complex now, more coherent, and they're starting to share elements with each other." He was right. The darkness that watched from Maya's early dreams now appeared in Thomas's nightmares. The spatial impossibility from Sophie's fear of the space under the stairs had manifested in another child's dream about a closet. The nightmares were cross-pollinating, building on each other, creating something larger than any individual child's fear. "They're forming a network," and realized. "The children don't know each other. They live in different parts of the city, but their nightmares are connecting somehow, building something together." "Should we stop our research?" N asked. "If our observations are strengthening these nightmares?" "No," and cut him off. "This is even more significant than we thought. We're witnessing the emergence of a collective fear structure. This could be the most important discovery in consortium history. We just need to be more careful." But being careful wasn't enough. Over the next week, the nightmares continued to evolve. The research team watched helplessly as their careful observations seemed to feed the very phenomena they were studying. Every scan made the nightmares stronger. Every measurement gave them more coherence. And then the manifestations began. It started small. Researchers reported seeing shadows that moved wrong, hearing sounds that the ship's sensors didn't register, finding objects in places they hadn't left them, easy to dismiss as stress or fatigue. Then N disappeared. They found him 3 days later in a storage bay, curled into a ball, his crystalline body clouded with trauma. He wouldn't speak at first. When he finally did, his words came out broken and terrified. "The garden," he whispered. "I was in the garden where fears grow. All the children's nightmares live there. They're not separate anymore. They're one thing now, one big thing, and it knows we're watching. It knows our names." The medical team sedated him and stood over her colleague, feeling fear herself for the first time in decades. Whatever N had experienced had broken something fundamental in his mind. She returned to the research data with new urgency. If the nightmares were dangerous, they needed to understand the danger. She dug deeper into the historical archives, searching for any precedent, any similar case. She found it buried in classified files, 40,000 years old. Another research team, another primitive species, another study of nightmares that generated unusual readings. The reports were fragmentary, many files corrupted or deliberately erased, but the final entry was clear enough. Day 847. The collective fear has achieved full manifestation. It no longer requires sleeping minds to exist. It has learned our weaknesses through our observations. 3 team members dead, 7 missing, 2 insane. We attempted to flee, but the nightmares followed us. They exist in the space between thought and reality now. We cannot escape what we ourselves fed with our attention and fear. Final recommendation: destroy all research. Quarantine this species. Do not study their dreams. They dreamed us gone, and soon we will be. The file ended there. The species that had written it no longer existed in any consortium records. And felt cold despite her environmental suit. They had made the same mistake. They had studied something they didn't understand, and now it was too late to stop. She called an emergency meeting. The entire research team gathered, their faces showing various species expressions of worry and fear. "We're terminating the project," and announced. "We're leaving Earth immediately and implementing full memory suppression protocols. Every record will be sealed under the highest classification." "Doctor, we can't just leave," X protested. "We're on the verge of understanding something fundamental about consciousness and fear. We're on the verge of creating something that could destroy us," and corrected him. "I've found records of a previous expedition that studied similar phenomena. That entire research team died. We will not repeat their mistake." But even as she spoke, the lights flickered again. A cold sensation rippled through the ship. On every display screen, unbidden, an image appeared. It showed Earth below them. It showed the sleeping city. It showed all the children dreaming their dreams. And it showed what their dreams had built together. The researchers stared in horror at the thing their observations had helped create. It had no single form. It was all the children's nightmares merged into one entity, vast and terrible and hungry for understanding. It was the darkness that watched. It was the reflection that questioned identity. It was the space that was larger inside than outside. It was every pure fear the children had ever generated, combined and amplified and made real. The entity had a name now, though none of the children had named it. The research computers designated it automatically, the culmination. And the culmination was reaching up from Earth toward their ship, extending tendrils of pure conceptual fear through the space between dreaming and waking, between thought and reality. "Engines now," and screamed, "Get us out of orbit." The ship's drives engaged, pushing them away from Earth. But as they accelerated, every researcher felt it, a presence in their minds, a connection they couldn't sever. The culmination had touched them during their observations, had learned from them, had become entangled with them. They couldn't run from it because it was already inside them, carried in their own fears and memories. And somewhere below on Earth, dozens of children slept peacefully, dreaming their pure and terrible dreams, completely unaware of what their nightmares had become. Part 3. The research vessel fled Earth at maximum speed, but the presence in their minds grew stronger with each passing hour. The culmination wasn't chasing them through space. It didn't need to. It existed in a dimension where distance meant nothing. Dr. N watched her crew deteriorate. X stopped eating, staring at his reflection in every surface, questioning which version was real. Two junior researchers barricaded themselves in their quarters, convinced that the spaces between the walls were larger than they should be. The ship's counselor reported that everyone was experiencing nightmares of unprecedented intensity. They had created something that fed on fear and observation, and now it had an entire research crew to sustain it. "We have to go back," and said finally. Her remaining senior staff looked at her with exhausted, frightened eyes. "Back to Earth?" X asked. "That's insane. We need to get farther away, not closer." "We can't get away. Don't you understand? The culmination exists because we observed it into being. As long as we fear it, as long as we think about it, we're feeding it. And going back is the only way we might stop it." "Stop it how?" And pulled up the data on her console. The children. The nightmares come from them, but they also end with them. Every night these children wake up, and when they wake up, the nightmares dissolve. They don't carry them into the waking world. They forget them before breakfast. So we've been thinking about this wrong. We assumed the nightmares were dangerous because they were so powerful, but we forgot the other half of the equation. These are still children's nightmares, and children don't just dream of fear. They dream of beating fear. She brought up recordings they had made in the early days of observation, before the deep scans, before the culmination formed. Recordings they had dismissed as unimportant. A child named dreaming of monsters under his bed, then dreaming of a flashlight so bright it made the monsters disappear. A girl named dreaming of a dark forest, then populating it with friendly animals and fairy tale heroes. A boy named James dreaming of being chased, then discovering he could fly. The same imagination that creates their pure fears also creates pure hope, and explained. Pure courage, pure defiance. We only studied half of what makes human children special. We focused on the nightmares and missed the other part. "You want to expose the culmination to the children?" X looked horrified. "That thing will terrify them. Maybe, or maybe they'll do what they do every night. Maybe they'll fight back." It was a desperate plan, possibly a catastrophic one, but they had no other options. The culmination was growing stronger, and soon it would be able to manifest fully in the physical realm. If that happened, the consequences could spread far beyond one research vessel. They returned to Earth orbit under stealth protocols, and reconfigured their equipment, not to observe this time, but to connect, to deliberately link the culmination with the sleeping minds that had created it. "This could make everything worse," X warned. "It probably will," and agreed. "But we created this problem. We have to try to fix it." She activated the connection. The culmination sensed the link immediately. It surged toward the sleeping children, eager to return to its source, and watched the reading spike as the entity touched the dreams of Maya, Thomas, Sophie, and dozens of other children. For a moment, nothing happened. The children's nightmares intensified. The readings went beyond anything they had measured before. Then something shifted. Maya was dreaming of her reflection again, but this time when the culmination manifested as the questioning entity that challenged her identity, Maya did something unexpected. She decided that having two of herself meant she had a friend. In her dream logic, the reflection became a sister, and they held hands and laughed together. The culmination fractured around the edges. It didn't understand. Fear was supposed to grow when you fed it, not transform into something else. Thomas dreamed of abandonment, of being alone in the universe forever. The culmination showed him the proof that connection was impossible, that he was fundamentally isolated. But Thomas, in the way that only a 9-year-old could, simply rejected that conclusion. In his dream, he decided that even if he was alone, he would make friends anyway. He populated his empty world with imaginary companions who became real through his belief. The fractures in the culmination grew wider. Sophie encountered the impossible space under the stairs, and instead of running from it, she brought a flashlight and decided to explore. In her dream, the scary place became an adventure. The thing that had been waiting there became a grumpy guardian that she befriended with cookies. One by one, the children's dreams transformed their fears, not through logic or reason, but through the same pure imagination that had created the fears in the first place. They believed in their nightmares completely, yes, but they also believed in morning. They believed in light switches and flashlights and parents and safety and the fundamental rightness of the universe. They believed that nightmares could be beaten. The culmination, built from pure fear, couldn't withstand pure hope. It was designed to feed on terror and grow stronger from observation and dread. But the children weren't observing it with fear. They were facing it with creativity, courage, and the stubborn human refusal to accept that the scary thing under the bed got to win. Dreamed of a bigger flashlight. Dreamed her dark forest filled with light. James dreamed he could fly high enough to see that the monster chasing him was actually small and far away. And slowly, impossibly, the culmination began to dissolve. And watched in amazement as the entity that had threatened to destroy her crew and possibly spread across the galaxy fell apart. The children's defensive dreams proved just as pure and potent as their fears. More potent, actually, because hope could transform and adapt while fear could only grow or diminish. The nightmares separated back into individual fears, losing their coherence and connection. Without belief to sustain them, they faded like mist in sunlight. The presence that had haunted the research vessel's crew lifted. Researchers stirred from their quarters, confused but healing. By morning, the culmination was gone. The children woke up, ate breakfast, and went to school. Most of them didn't remember their dreams. A few remembered fragments but dismissed them with the casual resilience of childhood. Maya told her parents she had a dream about having a sister. Sophie announced she wasn't scared of the space under the stairs anymore. Put his flashlight away, no longer needing it. Doctor and assembled her remaining crew. They looked exhausted, traumatized, but alive. "We will seal all records of this expedition under the highest classification," she said. "The consortium will never approve another study of human childhood dreams. Our official report will state only this: humanity generates Category Omega nightmares, but also Category Omega hope. They create the fears in the known galaxy, but they also possess the resilience. Recommend extreme caution. Recommend greater respect. Recommend we never threaten their children." "What about the children?" N asked, his body still clouded but recovering. "Should we warn humanity about what their children can do?" And considered this. Below them, the Earth turned peacefully in the sunlight. Billions of humans lived their lives, and millions of children dreamed their dreams, creating and destroying entire universes of fear and hope every single night without ever knowing it. "No," she decided, "they don't need to know. The children are handling it just fine on their own." The research vessel departed Earth's orbit and began its long journey back to consortium space. Behind them, the blue planet continued its rotation. Night fell across one hemisphere, and millions of children went asleep. They dreamed of monsters and darkness and impossible things. They created nightmares pure enough to reshape reality. And then morning came, and they woke up, and the nightmares ended, as nightmares always do. Because that's what human children do. They face their fears every night and win, over and over again, in the battlefield of their own imagination where courage and hope are just as real as terror. And they do it all without knowing how special, how powerful, how fundamentally important that makes them in a universe full of older, wiser, more advanced species who forgot long ago how to believe in both monsters and morning with equal intensity. Back on Earth, Maya woke from a strange dream about friendly aliens who were scared of being scared. She forgot it before breakfast. Under her bed, nothing stirred. The flashlight her parents had given her sat on the nightstand, unused but ready just in case. Because some things matter not because you use them, but because you know they're there when you need them. And in the vast darkness of space, the consortium learned a lesson that would be whispered in academic circles for generations to come. Humanity's children dream nightmares that could terrify gods, but they wake up every morning and go play anyway. That's not just special, that's humanity.